Okay, everybody, shalom. Did this man begin yesterday or today? I didn't know. Yesterday, okay, because I didn't, yeah, okay. Seemed like it was a quiet day yesterday for some reason. Okay. Anyway, obviously, our share is devoted to Tanakh, and we're doing Yoshua, but I wanted to continue a digression and just finish a thought about the Haftarah of Simchas Torah. Now, you'll see, although Simchas Torah is long gone, although I hope the Simcha of Torah will remain, but it is something that's Nogea Nach generally, so I think it's worthwhile to share with you. And that is, we know that on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we have a Kriyas HaTorah, and the Kriyas HaTorah is followed with a Haftarah, which is from the Nevi'im. Kriyas HaTorah is from the Chumash, and Haftarah is from the Nevi'im. When I was a young man, around 6 years old or something, and I first heard about the idea of Haftarah, and I didn't know what Haftarah meant, so I figured it out. I said, well, Nevi'im is less kadosh than the Torah, so Haftarah means it's half Torah. It's only like half of the Torah. But when I got to Havdalah, I couldn't make sense of it. So it broke down at that particular point. But the actual translation of Haftarah is to announce, meaning it was a public announcement of the teachings of the Nevi'im. Now, what is the origin of Haftarah? Where does Haftarah come from? Meaning why were Chazal mesakein that a Torah reading should be followed by a prophetic reading? So the truth of the matter is, the original institution of Haftarah was not an addition to the Torah. It was a replacement for the Torah. Because during the time of the Chashmonaim, when Antiochus made different gezeros, one of his gezeros was that the Jews were not allowed to publicly read the Torah. I'm always amazed at how stupid guards were. They were so literal. So as a result, we couldn't read the Torah. So instead, we read, from the Nevi'im, which connected to the Parsha, and the dumb guards didn't get that. They didn't see a problem with that. It's similar to Shema. Why in the Kedusha of Musaf on Shabbos, we all of a sudden say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad? Because one of Antiochus' gezeros were, you weren't allowed to say the Shema in davening. So these dumb guards would be in davening at the time when we were supposed to say Shema, and they made sure we didn't say it, so we snuck it in Kedusha. Somehow the guards didn't catch that. Right, Baruch Hashem. So the Haftarah actually took the place of Kriyas HaTorah. And that's why halachically a Haftarah has to have at least 21 psukim, because the minimum size of an aliyah are 3 psukim, and Shabbos has 7 aliyahs. So although we read a parsha that's typically bigger, but a minimal Kriyas HaTorah is 20 on Shabbos is 21 psukim, and the Haftarah is keneged a Kriyas HaTorah. So the original idea of a Haftarah was not to add on to the Torah, but it was a replacement at a time when we were not allowed to have Kriyas HaTorah. Later, when that gezerah became batal, and we were able to have Kriyas HaTorah, the Chachamim thought it was still good to keep the Haftarah because it gives you an important Musar message that augments the Parsha. By the way, Rashi in Masechah Shabbos actually says that the minhag in the time of the Mishnah was that Shabbos Mincha, after the Torah laning of Shabbos Mincha, they would read something from Kesuvim. So it's interesting. So in the morning we have Torah and Nevi'im. Shabbos Mincha, we had Torah and Kesuvim. There was a Haftarah from the Kesuvim at Mincha time. That minhag became batal, although it may perhaps survive. If you look at it and look in any siddur, look in the Art Scroll siddur, you will notice that after Shabbos Mincha, from Parshas Bereishis, starting 2 weeks ago, till Pesach, when you read Pirkei Avos, some people have a minhag of saying Borchi Nafshi and the 15 Shir Hamaluses. Right? The minhag Ashkenaz was that from Bereishis to Pesach, you said Borchi Nafshi and Shir Hamalos, and from Pesach to Rosh Hashanah, more or less, you said Pirkei Avos. Now, it could be that maybe the makor of saying Tehillim after Shabbos Mincha might be a zecher to the minhag in the time of Chazal that you did kesuvim at the time of Shabbos Mincha. Okay, be it as it may, that's Haftarah. Now, the Gemara does not give you a list of the Haftarahs that you have to read. Meaning, as long as it's connected to the Parsha in some way, Kihilos were given their own ability to do whatever they wanted. That's why Ashkenazim have Haftarahs, Svardim have Haftarahs, Italkim, Italians have Haftarahs, Hungarians have Haftarahs, Chabad has Haftarahs. Because Chazal were not Kaiveya what your Haftarah has to be. It was left to individual communities to be Kaiveya their Haftarah. The exception, however, is the Haftarahs for Yomim Tovim. For the Yomim Tovim, the Gemara in Megillah tells us what Chazal said the Haftarah is. So now, here we come to a very difficult question. The Gemara in Megillah says that the Haftarah for Shmini Atzeres, which in Eretz Yisrael is Simchas Torah, is Vayamod Shlomo, and this is in Sefer Malachim, where Shlomo HaMelech, remember the first Beis HaMikdash was dedicated over a 14-day period, and the last day of dedication was Shmini Atzeres. And Shmini Atzeres, Shlomo HaMelech blessed Am Yisrael upon the conclusion of the Chanukah Sabayis, and that is the Haftarah for Shmini Atzeres, because number one, it connects to what Shlomo HaMelech did on Shmini Atzeres, and number two, it connects to Zeis HaBracha, Moshe's blessing, Shlomo's blessing. Now, here is the problem. So the Gemara says, Beferish, the Haftarah for Shmini Atzeres is Vayamod Shlomo, which is about Shlomo HaMelech's blessing on the 14th day of dedication. By the way, as a little aside, if Shmini Atzeres is the last day and you count backwards 14 days, you will actually see Yom Kippur is one of the days of dedication for the first Beis HaMikdash. And in fact, the Gemara says that year they actually ate on Yom Kippur. The Simcha of Chanukah Sabayis overrid the prohibition of fasting on Yom Kippur through Nevuah. This was a prophetic Horah Shah. Normally a Navi cannot take away a mitzvah, but this was a one-time special event that it was even Docha Yom Kippur. Okay. Now, if you remember what we read on Simchas Torah, you will recall that was not the Haftarah that we read on Simchas Torah. The Haftarah that we read on Simchas Torah is the first chapter of Yehoshua that we had looked at, where Moshe Rabbeinu dies and Yeshua becomes the leader, and Hashem says, Chazak v'yamatz, be strong, and I will be with you like I was with Moshe. Again, that's a very logical choice. It is a logical choice because, after all, Zos HaBracha talks about the death of Moshe. First chapter of Yehoshua is what happened right after the death of Moshe, the change of leadership. But the kasha is, it's contradicting the ruling of the Gemara. So Bishlama in Chutz La'aretz, where you have 2 days, Shmini Atzeres on Simchas Torah, you could be Makayim both of them. On Shmini Atzeres, the 8th day, we read Vayamod Shlomo about the Birkas HaMelech, and on Simchas Torah we read about Yoshua. So in Chutz La'aretz, you're Makayim the Gemara, even if you have the Yehoshua Haftarah for Simchas Torah. But the problem is that in Eretz Yisrael, where all you have is 1 day, how could we have a minhag of Haftarah that is keneged what Chazal were kaiveya in Maseches Megillah? What we do, it directly contradicts what the Gemara says we're supposed to be doing. So Taisus in Maseches Megillah actually recognizes this. Taisus points out when the Gemara says the Haftarah for Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah is Vayamod Shloimai, Taisus says our minhag is not that way. We read Sefer Yoshua, and Taisus says it's a tzorech iyan. How could we be cholek on the Gemara? And he says V'shema, in the time of the Gainim, Rav Hai Gain. Rav Hai Gain was the last of the Gainim, and many say the greatest of the Gainim. Rav Hai Gain was Mesakein such a shino. He was mishana between the Gemara and this minhag. Once again, Tosas's answer is also very schwer, very difficult. Rav Hai Gain, as great as Rav Hai Gain was, he cannot be cholik on the Gemara. The Gainim cannot say that we don't follow the Gemara. So the question becomes, Number one, why did Rav Hai Gaon do it? And number two, how could Rav Hai Gaon do it if it's connected to Gemara? So there's a gewaldige teretz, a wonderful, wonderful teretz that is given by Rav Meir Simcha, who of course is the Ohr Somayach, a name that you're familiar with, the Meshech Chochmah on Chumash, and this is from the Meshech Chochmah. And he makes a very interesting point. When you ask a person, why is there a holiday of Simchas Torah? So everyone's always going to say, because that's when we finish the Torah. But you know, we didn't always finish the Torah on Simchas Torah. In fact, the Gemara says in a number of places that the original minhag of Eretz Yisrael was that the Torah was not completed on an annual cycle. The Torah was completed in a 3-year cycle. In other words, it's not a done deal. It's not an obvious point that you have to finish the Torah every year. The minhag of Eretz Yisrael was they finished the Torah every 3 years. Now, if they finished the Torah every 3 years, then what was Simchas Torah in year 1 and year 2? Right? It wasn't a Siyam Torah. It was simply the Yom Tov of Shmini Atzeres. In other words, Shmini Atzeres is a Yom Tov independently of the fact that you finished the Torah. It's a Yom Tov because it's a Yom Tov. Right? Not only that, but even every 3rd year, Shmini Atzeres was not the conclusion. In fact, there's a little bit of a question, how do you reconstruct the 3-year calendar? It's not so simple. But those who have tried to reconstruct the calendar conclude that either the Torah was finished before Rosh Hashanah, or the Torah was finished before Shavuos, or the Torah was finished before Pesach. In other words, Simchas Torah wasn't even the terminus of the Torah. Now, the Gemara does say the minhag of Eretz Yisrael was to read the Torah on a 3-year cycle. The minhag of Bavel was to finish the Torah in a 1-year cycle. And eventually what happened was that Eretz Yisrael adopted the minhag of Bavel. And that's why we only have a 1-year cycle. As far as I know, there is no Orthodox minhag that does a 3-year cycle. Interestingly enough, some Reform congregations do the Torah in a 3-year cycle, but they don't do it the right way, as you might expect. What they do is this. They'll do like 1/3 of Bereishis, week 1, then 1/3 of Noach, week 2, 1/3 of Lech Lecha, week 3, and then the next year they'll do the second part. Now that's not the way it worked. The way the minhag worked was you did Bereishis for like 3 weeks. You know, Bereishis 1/3, Bereishis 2nd, 3rd. In other words, you didn't go to Noach till you finished Bereishis. So the Reform minhag does not correspond to the actual 3-year cycle. But it's interesting already that by the time the Babylonian Talmud was completed, the minhag of Eretz Yisrael of a 1-year cycle was virtually extinct. The Gemara refers to it, but it was no longer practiced. But, interestingly enough, as late as the time of the Rambam lived in the 1100s and early 1200s, there was a group of renegade Israelis who lived in Mitzrayim, and they still kept up the old 3-year cycle. And the Rambam was very upset. The Rambam took efforts to kind of destroy that minyan, as it were, put them in cherem, excommunicate them, because they were violating the kaviyos of the Talmud Bavli, that you go to a 1-year cycle. Yeah.
I know, like in the 1-year cycle, every parsha had like certain significance, the name and the number of pasuk and whatnot. Did they, in the 3-year cycle, did they still see parshas the same way we do? Or did they divide differently?
You know, it's hard to know. I mean, we don't have a record, actually. We don't have a record of the names. What did they call the 2nd third of Bereishis, or the 3rd third of Bereishis? You know, we don't know a lot. We don't even, as I say, we don't even have a real calendar of how it worked. Some want to say, if you look at, a remez maybe is, if you look at the Medrash Rabbah for Chumash Bereishis, you will see it's divided into 93 chapters. So some want to suggest that the chapters corresponded to the number of parshiot of the Kriyas HaTorah of Eretz Yisrael, because Bereishis Rabbah, the Medrash Rabbah, is a product of an early Tekufa B'Eretz Yisrael. So there's a lot of mystery. Reconstructing the 3-year cycle is not so pashut. So here is the interesting point, therefore. It's important to understand that when you were operating on a 3-year cycle, the day that we call Simchas Torah had nothing to do with finishing the Torah. You didn't finish the Torah. But here's the chap. If you were operating on a 3-year cycle, what was the Kriyas HaTorah of Simchas Torah? So this is Reb Meir Simchas Chiddush. It was still Zeis HaBracha. But it wasn't because you were finishing the Torah. It's because it was the appropriate Torah reading. Right? Just like every Yom Tov reading, right? When you have a Yom Tov Kriyas HaTorah, so no matter where you are in the Parshat HaShavua cycle, you read the unique Kriyas HaTorah for Yom Tov. So says Reb Meir Simcha, on a 3-year cycle, you still read Zeis HaBracha, but not because you were finishing the Torah. You'd finish the Torah some other week, some other year. But because Zeis HaBracha had a shaychus to Shmini Atzeres. Why is that so? Because Shmini Atzeres is a celebration of the special love God has for Bnei Yisrael. So we bring in the special blessings that Moshe gave. So you see what's going on here, meaning the Kriyas HaTorah of Shmini Atzeres in Eretz Yisrael was always Zeis HaBracha. But it morphed into a different reason. When you were operating on a 3-year cycle, the Shmini Zeis HaBracha Kriya was not because of Siyum HaTorah. It was simply because of the theme of bracha, God's love as manifested in blessings. Only when we went to the 1-year cycle does Zeis HaBracha acquire a secondary reason that we're going to finish the Torah on this day. In fact, the Rogatchover, which is so interesting because the Rogatchover Gaon, Rav Yosef Rosen, was the co-Rav of Dvinsk together with the Ohr Somayach. Again, I can tell you a whole bunch of stories here. Dvinsk is a town in Latvia. And it's still around, and there are not too many Jews there, but there are some Jews there. Actually, I know a woman who lives in Dvinsk. And they had 2 Rabbanim. The Rav of the Misnagdim, of the non-Hasidim, was Rav Meir Simcha HaKohen, known as the Ohr Somayach. And the Rav of the Hasidim, actually was a Chabad rabbi, was the super genius Rav Yosef Rosen, who was called the Rogatchover Gaon. Rogatchover because he came from Rogatchover. They were very good friends. They were both Gaonei Olam Mamish, but they had very, very different personalities. Rav Meir Simcha was very quiet, very gentle. The Rogatchover was stormy and fiery and tempestuous. And they had very different personalities. Like, you'd be scared to talk to the Rogatchover because the Rogatchover would rip you apart. In fact, the Rogatchover would often only give you a string of Mara Makaimis. You would ask him a shaila, he would just say, he had a absolutely photographic memory. It says, Yerushalmi this, Tosefta this, Zohar this, Mar Nevuchim this, Rambam this. And to this day, there are kolalim whose full-time job is to try to decipher the Mara Makomos, meaning the Rogatchover never explained what the connection of the Mara Makomos were, and sometimes the Mara Makom seemingly has nothing to do with the subject at all, and that you're going from A to Z without explaining anything in the middle, and there are kolalim that try to unpack the Rogatchover's thinking. The story goes that Rav Aaron Kotler, who as a young man was already a Rosh Hashiva and a big, big genius, a big Eloi, wanted to speak in learning with the older Rogatchover, but he was afraid to go as a Rosh Hashiva because the Rogatchover would just cut him up. So he posed as a businessman who says, I learn a few hours a day, I'm a businessman. And the Rogatchover was very kind to business people. If you were a simple Jew, you weren't a Talmud Chacham, the Rogatchover treated you very kindly, he didn't expect a lot from you. So Rav Aaron told him a very complicated shtickle Torah, and Rav Aaron said he got the supreme compliment of his life. The Rogatchover said, for a working man, you're not too bad. Rav Aaron Kotler considered that to be the greatest of compliments. There was another time where a Rav of a city came to the Rogatchover and started telling him a Chiddush, and the Rogatchover listened and nodded, and the Rav says, I don't know what people say. People say you go to the Rav, and he's so harsh on Talmidei Chachamim. He gives them such a tough time. And the Rogatchover just said, you're right, I am very tough on Talmidei Chachamim. Whatever. So they had different personalities, very different personalities. Of course, Rav Meir Simcha said on the Rogatchover, people think the Rogatchover has such a great memory. He says he doesn't have such a great memory. He finishes Shas every month, probably in Yerushalmi. Okay, so anything in all of Shas, he learned within the past few weeks. That's not a memory. A good memory is, you learned it, 20 years ago, and you remember it. Everything is within 30 days. Okay, be it as may, but the reason I'm bringing it in is that it's fascinating that independently, the Rogatchover adds a very interesting nakuda to Rav Meir Simcha's Chiddush. Again, what's Rav Meir Simcha saying? Again, Rav Meir Simcha's Chiddush here, and you'll see how it answers the Haftarah in a moment, that even when we didn't finish the Torah on Simchas Torah, because a 3-year cycle, we still read Zayis HaBracha because of the concept of bracha, the love that God has for Bnei Yisrael. In other words, Zayis HaBracha was the Kriya even when you didn't finish the Torah, right? That's Rav Meir Simcha's Chiddush. So the Rogatchover adds an interesting nakuda. He actually says that the amount of the parsha that you read changed. When you were going with a 3-year cycle, and Zayis HaBracha was not read because you're finishing the Torah, it was read because of the brachos, you only read the brachos. There was no Chasan Torah. In other words, the Yom Tov Kriya was the brachos, your 5 aliyos. The adding of Chasan Torah only came later when it became the day that you finished the Torah. So what he's adding to Rav Meir Simcha is that not only was Zayis HaBracha the Kriya, even when you weren't finishing the Torah, but you didn't even finish Zayis HaBracha. You only read the 5 aliyos. And that's why if you look, it's a little confusing, because since on Simchas Torah the minhag is everybody gets an aliyah, so you lose count. But the truth of the matter is, Simchas Torah is a Yom Tov. On a Yom Tov, you're supposed to have 5 aliyos and a maftir. And according to many Rishonim, the 5 aliyos end before Chasan Torah. Because originally, those were the original Kriyas HaTorah of Yom Tov. Now, it is a machlokas. Some do include Chasan Torah as the 5th aliyah. But the original minhag was only the 5 aliyahs are before Chasan Torah, and that reflects the fact that that was the original kriya of Yom Tov. Okay, so now based on the combination of Rav Meir Simcha and the Rogatchover, we have a beautiful explanation for the change in Haftarah. Rav Meir Simcha writes in the Meshech Chochmah, that which the Gemara in Megillah says, that the appropriate Haftarah of Simchas Torah is the blessing of Shlomo HaMelech, that was the appropriate Haftarah when you were not finishing the Torah on that day. Meaning, when Zayis HaBracha was only there because of the theme of blessing, then the most appropriate Haftarah is the theme of blessing. Moshe's blessing, Shlomo's blessing. But when you switch to a 1-year cycle, and Simchas Torah becomes the day that you finish the Torah, then the focus is no longer only on blessing, it is on transition, finishing the old, moving to new. Based on that, the story of Yoshua is very important because that is the transition from the leadership of Moshe to the leadership of Yoshua. So if we ask the question, how could Rav Hai Gaon argue with the Gemara? The answer is he's not arguing because the Gemara's ruling was the appropriate Haftarah in a 3-year cycle. And Rav Hai Gaon said, once we have a 1-year cycle and we're ending the Torah, And when we end, we have to transition to a new beginning. The story of Yoshua is very good for that, because that represents the idea that even when you finish the old, you move on to something new, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give you the siyata d'shmaya. Yeah.
Why would that be the appropriate ruling for a 3-year cycle if they were doing a 1-year cycle?
Say again?
Why would that be the appropriate ruling for a 3-year cycle if they were doing a 1-year cycle when they were doing it?
They were doing a 1-year cycle when?
This is the ruling of the Talmud Bavli.
But it's a brisa. In other words, it's a ruling that is from a brisa. And Rabbi Simcha wants to say that the brisa originated from Eretz Yisrael. Now, it could be that in Bavel it took them a while to realize that a change would be appropriate. Rabbi Gaon decided that a change would be appropriate at that point. And that's not called being cholik on the Gemara, because there was a change in circumstance over what the brisa was referring to. Okay, so this is the idea that the emphasis switched from the notion of blessing to the notion of transition and ischadshus and renewal. In many, many ways, we had, of course, Rosh Hashanah last month, but in many, many ways, one could look at Cheshvan as really Rosh Hashanah, because, it's the beginning of ordinary life. Tishrei, nothing is ordinary. Everything is a Yom Tov and very sacred time and special moments, and you're not really in ordinary life. The beginning of the regular year is actually Cheshvan. And I think I mentioned before the important idea of the Chazon Ish, or the mashal of the Chazon Ish, where the Chazon Ish says, if you have a pot of water that's on a fire, and the pot of water is bubbling, spilling over, you don't really know if the pot is full to the top or half empty, because even a half empty pot is going to boil over when it's on the fire. So you can't really determine how full it is. Only when it's off the fire and it's no longer connected to a heat source can I then evaluate how much water is in the pot. The Chazon Ish says the same thing is true with Yomim Tovim. If you are inspired when you're connected to a Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchas Torah, that doesn't really say that you've been changed. Because even if you're half empty, you'll be inspired when you're connected to the exciting, inspirational times. The real litmus test of whether you have truly been transformed is when you're off the fire, is something within you. It's recorded. Chabad has a little maisa where the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak, the Riyatz, asked his father, the Rashab, Rav Shlomo Dov, he says, after Rosh Hashanah, Aser Shemei Tshuva, Sukkot, Simchas Torah, and now it's Cheshvan. It's kind of a downer, Cheshvan. He says, what do we do now? What's our Avodah now? We finished all those things. What's our Avodah? And the Rebbe Rashab said, now is the time to do Tshuva. What's the pshat? It's actually a very, very profound and a very true statement. A lot of us have the idea, because Elul and Tishrei are so intense, we kind of almost have a sense of relief. Okay, Baruch Hashem, I can put this tshuva stuff away in a drawer for a while, and I'll pull it out, next Elul or whatever it would be, and I don't have to think about it for a while. It's exactly the opposite. Now is the time to do tshuva, because now is the time to take all of those thoughts and translate them into action. Because otherwise they became empty promises, empty words. Okay? So Cheshvan, people say, Cheshvan is called Mar Cheshvan, bitter Cheshvan, because there's no Yomim Tovim in the month of Cheshvan, right? That's a famous word. Although etymologically, actually, if you want to know why it's called Mar Cheshvan, is because Mar in Lashon of Tanakh is raindrops. So Cheshvan is the rainy season. But the famous drush in Chassidus is, it's the bitter month of Cheshvan because there are no Yomim Tovim. Now let's test that for a moment, just to see pshat. Is it true that Cheshvan is the only month without any Yomim Tovim? Well, let's see. Kislev, of course, has Chanukah, okay. Teves has the end of Chanukah, okay. Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, So you're stretching Yom Tov a little bit, but okay, Tu B'Shvat is a Yom Tov. Adar, of course, is Purim. Nisan is, of course, Pesach. Okay. Iyar. What holiday do you have in Iyar? So if you're a Zionist, Yom Ha'atzmaut, Yom Yerushalayim, okay. If you're Haredi, you're not going to count them. You have Lag BaOmer, again, stretching a little bit, and Pesach Sheni, which actually is a Yom Tov, although we don't necessarily celebrate it as much as we can. Sivan has Shavuos. Okay. What about Tammuz? What does Tammuz have? Tammuz has 17th of Tammuz. That's fast day. That's not a Yom Tov. But remember, the Navi Zechariah says that when Mashiach comes, all of those fast days are going to become days of joy. So the 17th of Tammuz is considered to be a Yom Tov in the sense that it'll be a day of joy. By the way, that would also explain Asara B'Teves as well, although there you have the second half of Hanukkah. Av is the same thing. Av is the 9th of Av, but that's the day Mashiach is born, and that'll be day of Sasim B'Simcha. You also have the 15th of Av, which was, together with Yom Kippur, the happiest day in Klal Yisrael. Then we have Elul. What holiday, what Yom Tov does Elul? Elul also doesn't have Yom Tovim, but once again, it's a Hachana for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, so we consider Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to be the culmination of Elul, so that's a Yom Tov. But Cheshvan is bereft. Cheshvan is empty. Cheshvan is mar. Cheshvan is bitter. No Yomim Tovim. Nothing special. But Cheshvan is the litmus test. Cheshvan is the test. Have I grown from my Yomim Tovim? Have I been influenced? Have I been elevated? Have all of my resolutions been sincere? So I'm really willing and able to carry them out in real life. So Cheshvan is an extremely important month. And it's brought down in Sfarim that the third Beis HaMikdash, B'mheira v'yameinu, is going to be dedicated in the month of Cheshvan. That this will actually be the month. We hope it'll be this month, but if not, whenever it'll be, it's going to be in the month of Cheshvan. Right? The Mishkan was dedicated in Nisan. The first Beis HaMikdash was dedicated in Tishrei, during Sukkot. The second Beis HaMikdash was originally dedicated in Adar, and then rededicated Hanukkah. That's the rededication of it, which is Adar and Kislev. And the third Beis HaMikdash is going to be in Cheshvan, because once again, if we can show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we're sincere in our resolve, we can be Zocha to the Binyan Beis HaMikdash. So I want to wish everyone a good Zman, a Zman of growth, a Zman of Steiging, a Zman of Aliyah. We are still, of course, in a situation of war, a situation of sakana, and if you're not in the army, and again there are reasons for not being in the army, but l'chal hapachas, as you learn, as you daven, as you do your mitzvahs, you should think that you're doing it to be mishtatef in the tsar of Klal Yisrael, and that your learning and your davening and your mitzvahs should be a zechus to bring shalom and Yeshua to Am Yisrael and to Eretz Yisrael. And that way, you are part of the milchama. Like somebody told me that their daughter asked them, it's a difficult question. She said, Abba, why aren't you in the army? Or why aren't you a soldier? It's a hard question. It is a hard question a little bit. It's not an easy question, and it deserves a lot more discussion than I can give right now. But the father gave a very good answer. He says, I am part of the army. I just work in a non-combat division. Or I'm osek in Milchamta Shel Torah. Now, you could say that flippantly, you can say that as a little bit of a joke, and then it becomes just a joke, which is not such a good joke when people are dying. But if you take it seriously, then you really do have to feel that I'm trying to push myself to bring zechuyas for Klal Yisrael. So I think it's very important that B'nai Torah that are learning during this time take their learning b'dafka very, very seriously and have a conscious kavana that this will be part of what will bring bracha to Am Yisrael. And B'ezras Hashem, may it be so. Okay.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.